Hello and welcome back to Favorite Things. Today we're going to review this Serica Commando 4512. It's made by a company which is called Serica. It's a French micro brand making watches with a very unique look and features, and they're really developing their own signature DNA. I think that they're going to be successful for a long time. Matter of fact, one of their diver watches was recently already copied by a smaller brand, so that's interesting. Anyway, the 4512 is a wonderful blending in many different ways. First of all, I think it's the perfect size, especially for me with my 17 centimeter or 6.75 inch wrist. Let's put it on wrist here. Take off the ranchero, put it aside there. Why don't other manufacturers make watches in 37 millimeters? I think it's a perfect size, especially for me. I think the new Rolex Explorer would have been a great success at 37 to 37.5 millimeters. The bond clip bracelet is wonderful. You know, at first I was a little bit dubious, and I was actually considering which aftermarket Forstner bracelet would fit this watch, but then I realized how great this bond clip can be. It's very comfortable, and it's got the best micro adjust system you can imagine, because these links are relatively small and you just size it up and click and boom. There's no stretch. It's not a stretch bracelet. But yeah, very comfortable. If you want to tighten it up a little bit, just give it a little slack and boom. Wonderful. Very comfortable. Very comfortable. And it has that military look. I like that. The pairing of this watch head with the bond clip bracelet was probably the best design detail going into this watch. And that says a lot, because there's a lot of positivity here. The watch case resembles some old military watches. Particularly a good example would be the SEMA Dirty Dozen watch. This wide brushed bezel reminds me of the Patek Philippe Nautilus. A quick look at the dimensions here. Case diameter is, it's actually 37.5. Check that again. Yeah, so almost 38. And then we've got a lug to lug of 46. And of course, this is a 20 millimeter lug width. And then we've got a thickness. We've got a sapphire crystal, a low, I would say that's a low dome. And thickness is 11.62, so it's still pretty good considering there's 200 meters of water resistance in here. But, you know, being that it's a manual winder, it's actually, could have been a little thinner. Like I said, I wouldn't mind it if this was 100 meters water resistant and a thinner case. The case is nicely brushed, accenting the slightly concave contours of the mid case. But from some angles, like 6 o'clock, the thicker case looks a little bit blocky, like the Tudor, for example. It's powered by the Soprod P24, which is a Swiss-made movement. The painted numbers are the exact same font as the Omega Railmaster Ranchero, if you notice. For example, take a look at the 9 and the 3 and the 12. Maybe even the same size. Also, similarly, the numbers are not luminous. As I think their idea is that would compromise the precision and crispness of these numbers, which they are pretty crisp. The absolute glossy black dial reminds me of my Rolex Explorer, giving it a bit of a luxury vibe. And like the Railmaster here, there is no lume pip on the needle seconds hand, which is also unpainted. It's just chrome. And so that also kind of makes it more luxurious, more dressy. But potentially a little bit less sporty, and it's also harder to see in low light. The broad arrow handset is also very Omega inspired, but much more visible with the brushing on the surface. The numbers and markers are bright, no faux patina here. Might take inspiration from some military vintage watches, but this is not trying to be anything other than a modern watch. This Commando dial is one of 3 designs that you can choose from. The California dial, the standard WWW dial with the railroad track instead of the open second slashes, and this one. At times, the legibility of the dial suffers as the broad arrow gets lost in the busyness of that field dial with its second ring of 24-hour numbers, because things are very jumbled in the center part of this dial. So if I had my way, I would have put these numbers a little bit closer to the perimeter. It would have been nice to have an option for a British-style W10 dial with no 24-hour number markers and a railroad track. The loom is pretty minimal and it forms this cool diamond pattern, and yes, you can get really good at telling the time with some practice, but only if this is your only watch. The minimal branding on the dial is very military spec inspired. You can see here that there's just a Serica and very small text there next to the word Swiss, and of course a nod to the old Swiss made T classic tritium style signature. Besides the proper Serica logo on the case back, the only other Serica branding is hidden on the back side of the bond clip bracelet, right there. I really love the large winding crown, especially as this is a manual winder. Other reviewers have criticized the screw-down nature of this manual winder, but I don't mind it, especially as it allows for 200 meters of water resistant, which actually makes it the most water resistant watch that I have currently in my collection. Rolex also has a long history of doing this with their Oyster date watches from decades ago, where it would be a manual winder that screwed down. And of course that ensured the maximum waterproofing of the Oyster case. As far as function, the screw-down crown functions very well. It's, oh, that's another thing. Let's measure that. It's a nice big crown. 7.3, that's great. So like I said, that crown is nice and grippy. It pops out with confidence. And the only downside here for me is that winding the movement is a little spongy, not as precise or as clicky as I would like. Also, the movement has overcoil protection. In other words, you can't overwind it, which is good for decreasing the chance of damaging the movement. But on the downside, as a fan of manual wound movements, you don't get that satisfactory feeling of getting a full wind of that mainspring. But now this leads to my major issue with these watches. Too much of a compromise. Trying to click too many boxes, riding on too many fences. The needle seconds hand, the glossy black dial, and the high polished bezel dome slope. Minimal loom suggests luxury. However, the bond clip, the 24-hour field dial, the screw-down crown, the 200 meters of water resistant, the manual winding, drilled lugs, and the minimal branding suggest a military tool. So to some, this might be the perfect watch. To others, it might not be. But it definitely has the potential for being a one-watch collection for somebody. Is that you? Who knows? Gotta try it. Please give me a thumbs up, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.